Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Morning Shot. I have read Andre de Ruyter's new book called Truth to Power. And let me just say, I think it's a good book. I think people should read it. And I think it does really crystallize what went wrong in Eskom and more importantly, what is going wrong in the country. Because de Ruyter has a knack of understanding and explaining it in a way that is very, very useful. With me is Byron, who apparently works too hard and has not actually read the book.
No, I haven't read the book. So you're going to tell me all about the book and how great it is.
The first thing you need to know about Eskom is that it's much worse than you think, right? All the reports about the cartels and the lack of management and the lack of sanitization at these plants is real. And Andre even says so himself at the end of the book. Like, does he consider himself a failure? He says he can understand why people might think that. But he severely underestimated how broken that place was. And if he is correct about how broken the place is, and I think he is correct, you can just imagine how every single other aspect of the state is broken to this degree.
Yeah, and so what I can comment on is obviously Pravin Gordhan, the arch turd of the ANC, was on TV today defending himself against the book. And one of the things he said is, well, de Ruyter couldn't have been in charge of all this stuff because at the end of the day, he didn't really seem to actually be running the place. And they all said, well, how do you figure that? He says, well, he's writing a book for the last 3 years, so what could he know about Eskom? And clearly when he talks about how broken it is, that's because he didn't invest enough time in actually fixing the place.
Yeah, except that de Ruyter does explain that, right? He went to all the power plants all the time. He had safety boots on, like his uniform was safety boots because he was always out and about. And what he found was people just not doing the jobs. And then when he told them to do it, they did it. Then he came back a few weeks later, people weren't doing the jobs whatsoever. And every time something broke due to corruption or due to the coal cartel or something like that, he would report it to the police, he would report it to intelligence, he would report it to Gordhan, he would report it to the presidency. And guess what he got in return, Byron?
Fuck all.
Very much so. Very much. You see, it's not difficult to understand how the story plays out now, is it? Yes, literally nothing. Imagine, Byron, if you will, you are competing in the Olympic Games, 50-meter freestyle, and then someone says, your coach says, oh, let me put handcuffs around your ankles. Just because, do you blame the swimmer or do you blame the coach?
So Gordhan actually had a comment to this. He says, well, you see, the problem is, Ramon, he doesn't believe that because he says he never got any of the documentation. He says it never came to his desk. He says they asked de Ruyter for it numerous times. And to what de Ruyter said is, well, he didn't want to cast allegations immediately. So he had the documentation. He held on for a while just to, confirm the suspicions. So according to Gordhan, he kind of knew there was stuff there, but, he didn't really see it because no one ever gave him the paperwork because, reasons.
And for more on this and more, stay tuned after an advert from Telcorp. Building something great requires the right tools. So if you're in the business of building roads, moving earth, or mining, you know that having the right equipment can make all the difference. And that is where Telcorp comes in. Telcorp specializes in top-of-the-line earth-moving equipment to get the job done faster, safer, and more efficiently. They have over 300 vehicles for sale, from bulldozers to excavators, even heavy-duty trucks. But of course, Telcorp does not just sell equipment. They provide a whole turnkey solution to all earth-moving needs. They offer maintenance, they offer services, they even offer international transport, including all the documentations and clearances. So if you need to build a road or mine for minerals or do anything related to breaking the earth apart, Telcorp is your first port of call. To find out more, check out the link in the description down below. Yeah, sure, except he has acknowledged that the ANC was corrupt in terms of Hitachi building Medupi and Kusile. Gordhan did actually say that in Parliament today. And also, Gordhan admitted to knowing who the ANC leaders are who are involved in the corruption cartel. So it was not a surprise when Andre told him. Yet now he's like, I didn't have any information at the time. Weird.
Yeah, I mean, he has also said, obviously, that the ANC is not corrupt. And how dare you say the ANC is corrupt? But apparently, the actual invoice for Hitachi shows that the ANC got paid 1.2 million for the deal. In fact, it's actually on the invoice as an ANC supplier expense. So, these guys didn't even hide it. They were like, yeah, that's what we're paying you. So, yeah, apparently that's a thing. But according to Gordhan, he still didn't know about it. And, corruption, I mean, such a big word, eh?
Yeah, huge word. And what Gordhan does, and what de Ruyter does as well in the book, they both talk about state capture, right? Gordhan still blames state capture, despite the fact that he was a minister throughout that period of time. And despite the fact he was and still is a member of the ANC, of the people involved in state capture, but he likes to use this term state capture to denote a few things. And the most important thing about state capture people need to know, it was a name organized, created, and vetted by the South African Communist Party to describe the corruption between the state and the private sector so that the SACP can blame the private sector. That's all it is. It's a marketing term by commies to say it was trillion capital, it was the Guptas, it was this, it was all these private companies take advantage. And that is
I'm very glad you said that, Ramon, because, the whole state capture thing, Gordhan's got you covered. I mean, hey, you predicted the whole segment, Ramon, because, he is a commie after all. But anyway, Gordhan basically says, everybody's pointing their fingers at the ANC for the kickbacks that they got. He says, but it's not actually the ANC. It's actually private business. And then he actually gave an example of it. And he said, Chancellor House, mate. Remind me, who owns Chancellor House?
I think it's the ANC, if I'm not mistaken.
ANC's private business, so okay.
Yeah, no, basically the ANC is innocent in all of this, and private business just managed to grab some of the key cadres in ANC circles and bribe them. So it's actually big capital's fault. That's what state capture was about. It wasn't about the ANC selling the future of this country to themselves, right, for a dime. It's not about that. It's big capital's fault. No. And this is the wordplay that Gordhan entertains all the time to sort of deflect responsibility away from the ANC. Sooner or later, he has to realize, A, he works for the ANC, B, ANC is responsible for Eskom, and C, the ANC is responsible for all of the justice systems, the police, the intelligence, everything that is meant to safeguard South Africa. They failed on all of those fronts. And there's only one person responsible. There's only one institution responsible. It's the fucking ANC. The people still entertain this notion that Gordhan is a good guy. Come on.
Well, actually, Ramon, he's got you covered. Because again, during his press conference, he said, actually, you're right, Ramon. It should have been left to the police. But apparently, big business funded an operation, and by that they mean obviously the BSLA, funded an investigation into corruption at Eskom. And how dare business do that? They shouldn't have done that. They should have left it to the state, because the state does such a sterling job. We all know how good they are, eh? Call your coppers. They're there in 5 minutes. We all know how they work. Anyway, apparently big business should have just left it to them, even though big business has no electricity or lights on and can't run big business. Anyway, apparently he's going to investigate whether or not he can even pursue any criminal charges against big business for funding an investigation into corruption at Eskom.
Even when big business is trying to help, he still wants to fuck them. Welcome to the ANC, guys. And this is not a deviation from the review of the book. I think this is the crux of the argument of the book. The one that I got. The details are fine. You can read the book for the details about how things fucked up. That's fine. But the essential detail you need to understand in this book is A, ANC hates business of all kinds, and B, white liberals like Andre de Ruyter don't understand African politics. They focus on rules, they focused on governance, they focus on corporate structures and how everything works in that particular way. And I think that would be wonderful if you have a company in England. It's wonderful if you have a company in Australia. In Africa, it just is not the case. And the big failure of Andre de Ruyter is being a sort of white classical liberal guy going into an African problem company like Eskom and assuming he could solve it. But white liberals can never solve African problems. It's not a governance issue. It's much deeper than that.
Well, on this front, I think you and Gordhan have finally found some common ground, because Gordhan says de Ruyter's problem is that he thought he would go in there as a hero and fix Eskom on his own.
Yeah, except de Ruyter didn't understand how power works in Africa, so it was basically a losing bid right from the start. So that's the essential element of this book that I got. It's like sort of liberalism will not solve African problems. And I think I will call it the DA syndrome, for lack of a better word. If you are a liberal, classical, conservative, otherwise, you will not understand Africa through your lens of the world. It won't make sense. And because it doesn't make sense, it doesn't give you the strategic know-how how to navigate and solve problems in South Africa. And that's really what the book is about at the end of the day.
Yeah, and from that point, I suppose, again, you and Gordhan would agree, because Gordhan actually does say, look, the problems at Eskom are far deeper and far more serious, and they're not as easy to fix, he says. But, for those of us who aren't arch commies, it is actually pretty easy to fix. If you give Solidariteit an unfettered mandate to fix Eskom, mate, they'll have the place running within 12 months, guarantee. But Solidariteit wouldn't put up with the shit that is going on now at Eskom. Because one of the things that Ruyter does obviously point out is that the biggest problems with the ANC is it's still wedded to a Marxist dogmatic viewpoint where they get to control everything. Now, for those of us who all sit there and think, well, maybe the ANC want to do this for our benefit, luck fork. And actually, the one thing that the Ruyter does point out is that the only reason they want to have control over everything is so that they can, quote unquote, eat. Remember the statement of, it's fine, Ruyter, you can fix some of the corruption at Eskom, but you need to let some of the cadres eat. And that's really all the ANC really want, mate. And I think De Ruyter's biggest fault at Eskom is just not understanding that the ANC cadres need to eat. They need to eat some more, my friend. Yeah. And when they look like they might be overblown and a little bit too bloated and they might pop, you just let them keep eating, my friend. And De Ruyter didn't really play that game. And that's why he ended up not lasting at Eskom. Because at the end of the day, he wasn't a team player.
Yeah. So how do we solve Eskom? I think there's very simple ways to do it. Number one, make Gayton McKenzie the CEO. Number two, suspend all the constitutional rights of Eskom employees. Number three, shoot the cartel members. Really, they're of no use in human life or psychological life or social life in terms of being alive. Number four, let Solidarity run the entire engineering project throughout Eskom for at least 2 years. And number five, you suspend labor rules, you suspend emission rules, you suspend all these bullshit rules that keeps the ANC in power. Once you take away those powers from the state has no recourse whatsoever. So solving Eskom is actually a very simple thing. You just have to take away the commie bullshit. It's not that hard. It really isn't.
Which is exactly why it's never going to happen. And it's just a pipe dream. Because the commies are just, as Margaret Thatcher once said, the problem with socialism and the problem with letting people choose socialism is that they might not choose it. They might choose something else. And at the end of the day, commies ain't letting go of their hand anytime soon, are they?